Why was her name still classified, if she was supposed to be dead? The morning sun stretched long shadows across the base as Sarah Martinez sat alone in the armory. The steel table before her gleamed under the cold white light. On it lay the broken anatomy of a Barrett .50 caliber rifle, disassembled with a precision that bordered on ritual. Her hands moved with deliberate calm, each motion exact. Every metallic click followed a rhythm learned through years of repetition, the rhythm of someone who understood that a single mistake could decide who lived and who didn't. She wasn't cleaning a weapon. She was preparing silence. The air smelled faintly of oil and iron. Around her, the hum of the military base echoed, voices, footsteps, the muffled clang of distant machinery. None of it reached her. Sarah existed in a small, self-contained world where nothing existed beyond the next breath and the next screw. The Barrett's massive frame dwarfed her. At first glance, she looked too slight, too fragile for it, the quiet kind of soldier people underestimated. New recruits often assumed she was a technician or a logistics officer, someone who didn't belong anywhere near a rifle this size. They never guessed. They never knew that the same hands tightening a scope mount had ended wars no one spoke about. 3 years on this base, and still, only a handful of people knew who she really was. Some thought her distant, others thought her cold. But what they didn't know was that distance was survival. Her weapon gleamed under the neon lights, spotless, perfect, alive. Sarah paused, ran her thumb along the receiver, and exhaled softly. It wasn't reverence, it was memory. The weight of the rifle was as familiar as her heartbeat. She could have assembled it blindfolded, mid-blast in a sandstorm. She had done it before. Afghanistan, Iraq, places where the world turned beige and bullets replaced language. But she didn't think about those missions now. Not when she cleaned. Cleaning was the only time she could pretend the noise had stopped. Across the base, Commander Jake Thompson walked with heavy steps through the operations wing. He carried a stack of after-action reports, ordinary paperwork except for one. One file stopped him cold. His eyes froze on a single line. Target eliminated. Confirmed distance, 3,247 meters. Jake blinked. That number, it wasn't just impressive. It was nearly impossible. A shot that would rewrite records. One of those distances that turned snipers into legends whispered about in training halls. But that wasn't what made him grip the file tighter. It was the name on the report. Martinez S. His heart slammed once, hard enough to make him stop walking. The hallway blurred. For a moment all he could hear was the low hum of the fluorescent lights. Martinez. Sarah Martinez. That name shouldn't exist anymore. Not here, not on a mission log. Because Sarah Martinez had died 2 years ago. He remembered the day he'd received the message, helicopter down, no survivors. He'd led the search. Weeks of combing through desert wreckage. No bodies, no signals, nothing but a crater of twisted metal and sand. In the end, they'd closed the file, held a memorial, and he'd written the letter to her mother himself. He could still see the ink smudge on the word sacrifice. He'd recommended her for a posthumous medal. He stood at her memorial, saluted the folded flag, and promised himself he'd carry her discipline forward in every soldier he trained. And now this. Her name. Her kill. A distance only one person he'd ever known could possibly make. Jake exhaled through his teeth and dropped into the nearest chair. His mind raced through possibilities: impersonation, clerical error, code name. None of them fit. He knew that precision. He'd seen it once years ago when she'd saved his entire unit with 3 perfect shots in 30 seconds. He could still remember the way she'd said, "Sir, Wynn's got a story if you listen right." He opened the classified section of the report. Minimal detail. Target eliminated. Mission success. Range verified. Operator Martinez S. No attached video, No support documentation, just coordinates and a timestamp Syria. Yesterday. Jake rubbed his temples. If this was real, if Sarah was alive, then someone had lied, and not just to him. To the entire command chain, to her family, to the world. He picked up the secure line. Get me intel verification on mission Delta 07. Authorization, sir. Thompson, priority 1. He hung up, then stared at the file again. If she was alive, where had she been for 2 years? And who was giving her orders? Back in the armory, Sarah finished reassembling the Barrett. Her hands moved on autopilot, insert bolt, lock receiver, adjust bipod. She checked the scope alignment against the light. Perfect, as always. But her reflection in the weapon's steel caught her for a second. 2 years of living as a ghost had left their mark. Shorter hair, paler skin, eyes that never fully rested. She closed the case and slid the rifle inside. Every motion neat, exact, controlled. Control was the only thing she had left. Outside, the base was stirring. She could sense it, that subtle shift in rhythm only trained soldiers notice. More movement, more tension, conversations too short, glances too sharp. She'd seen it before, right before something changed. Something was moving in the chain of command. And she had a feeling it had to do with her. Sarah walked through the corridor, blending in with the blur of uniforms. Her presence was unremarkable, deliberately so. The kind of face that disappeared in a crowd. 2 years of covert operations had made sure of that. She passed groups of soldiers laughing, talking, unaware that the quiet woman among them had just made the farthest confirmed kill in modern military history. But she wasn't thinking about the record. She was thinking about the consequences. A 3,247-meter shot was a signature, one only a handful of people on Earth could make. It was as if she'd carved her initials into the wind. It would draw attention from the kind of people who lived in shadows and the ones who hunted in them. Her comm device buzzed twice, a coded message. Meet confirmed, standard protocol, civilian attire. Her jaw tightened. That meant debriefing. But not the usual kind. She glanced once more around the base, then slipped into the changing room. Within minutes, the soldier was gone, replaced by a woman in jeans, a gray jacket, and a cap pulled low. The kind of ghost who could walk past cameras and not exist in a single frame. Outside the gates, a civilian vehicle waited. Sarah moved like she belonged anywhere and nowhere, vanishing into the sunlight. Jake Thompson spent the next hours buried in dead-end calls and encrypted silence. Every inquiry came back blocked, redacted, or above clearance. Even his contacts in intelligence, the ones who owed him favors, went quiet at the mention of her name. Finally, he reached one man, Colonel Marcus Reed, head of a unit most people didn't even know existed. When Reed answered, his voice carried that unshakable calm of someone used to controlling chaos. "Commander Thompson," he said, "it's been a while." "Marcus, I need information about one of my former soldiers." There was a pause. "Which one?" "Sarah Martinez." Silence stretched. Jake could almost hear the static. Then Reed exhaled, long and slow. "Come alone, building 47 800 hours. No one is to know. This conversation never happened." The line clicked dead. Jake sat in silence for a moment, staring at the phone. He'd been in enough classified rooms to know what that meant. There was something buried deep enough to ruin careers, or save them. He looked down at the photo clipped inside the file, a young woman in fatigues, holding the Barrett like it was part of her. The faintest trace of a smile on her lips. That photo was taken right after her first confirmed kill, 1,200 meters across a canyon. She looked proud then. Now he wondered if pride had survived what came after. 300 meters away, in a safe house that technically didn't exist, Sarah sat at a metal table identical to the one in the armory. The difference was the silence. Here, There was no bass noise, no laughter, no footsteps, just the hum of a small generator and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. The comms unit buzzed again, a coded tone incoming. She pressed the earpiece. Agent Martinez, a familiar voice whispered, "Lisa Park." Sarah leaned back. "You're early." "So are you," Lisa replied, her tone even. "Let's talk about your shot." Sarah's lips pressed into a line. "It was necessary." "Necessary," Lisa repeated. "And loud, 3,247 meters. You know what that does. It makes analysts curious. It makes command nervous." "I eliminated a high-value target. Civilians are alive because of it." Lisa sighed. "I know, Sarah, and you did it perfectly, but perfection draws attention, and attention is fatal for ghosts like you." Sarah didn't answer. The silence between them said enough. Lisa's voice softened. "Jake Thompson knows." Sarah's head snapped up. "What?" "He received the report this morning. He's asking questions. You'll be compromised within 24 hours. For a long moment Sarah said nothing. Then quietly, "I should have taken the shot from closer." Lisa gave a faint, humorless laugh. "That's not what worries me. What worries me is what you'll do when he finds you." At that exact moment, Jake stood in front of Building 47, the restricted sector of the base, a place where clearance wasn't requested, it was granted by need. 2 guards checked his credentials, then led him through a series of scanners until the world outside ceased to exist. Colonel Reed waited in a dim conference room. Screens glowed along the walls, showing satellite feeds and streams of classified data. Jake recognized some coordinates from the Middle East, heat signatures, drone overlays. Reed gestured for him to sit. "What I'm about to tell you," he began, "doesn't leave this room." Jake nodded, wordless. "Sarah Martinez," Reed said, "died 2 years ago officially." Jake's jaw tightened. "Officially." In reality, she was offered a choice. Reed turned one of the monitors toward him. "Become someone else. Operate where no name exists. Missions with no record, no oversight, no return address." He tapped a key. Red markers flared across a map: Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Syria. "Every red point," Reed said quietly, "is her work. 47 confirmed kills, 12 dismantled terror cells, thousands of civilian lives saved." Jake stared at the map, the reality sinking in. "She's been doing all that alone." "Completely autonomous," Reed said. "No support, no official acknowledgement. Her file was buried the day that helicopter went down. You wrote her eulogy while she was crawling out of that wreckage with 3 broken ribs." Jake's throat tightened. "You let her disappear." "She chose to disappear," Reed corrected, "and she saved more lives than entire battalions." Jake looked down, struggling to breathe through the flood of anger and awe. "And now?" "Now, Commander, she's in trouble. That last shot broke her cover. The enemy knows there's a ghost out there, a sniper they call the Desert Phantom, and they're hunting her." Reed's eyes met his. "We need you to find her before they do." Far from the base, Sarah stared at her reflection in the dark window of the safe house. The woman who looked back was both familiar and foreign, alive, but not living. 2 years of silence, 2 years of missions that didn't exist, 2 years of being a name no one could speak. She reached into her duffel bag and pulled out the photo of her old unit. Jake was there, smiling, sunburnt, alive. She touched the corner of his image just once, then tucked it away. Because ghosts didn't keep photos. But she did. Outside, dawn broke over the desert, the kind of light that made the sand shimmer like broken glass. She slung the rifle case over her shoulder and whispered to herself, "You can't stay invisible forever." And for the first time in 2 years, Sarah Martinez walked toward the past she'd buried. How do you meet a ghost you've already buried? The question echoed in Commander Jake Thompson's mind as he left Building 47. The morning heat hit him like a wave, but his thoughts stayed cold. If Colonel Reed was telling the truth, Sarah Martinez, the soldier he'd mourned, the woman he'd failed to save, was alive, out there, hunted by people who didn't believe in boundaries or mercy. Reed had given him no details, only a destination: Sector 12, an abandoned desert strip 2 hours away. "She'll contact you," Reed had said, "or she won't. Either way, you'll know." The ride was long, the kind that leaves too much room for ghosts to climb into the passenger seat. Sand stretched endlessly on both sides, a flat ocean of beige. Jake's convoy wasn't military, just a dusty civilian truck and a single weapon under the seat. He'd been told to come alone, and somehow he knew disobeying that order would be fatal. The GPS pinged softly as he approached the coordinates. No buildings, no posts, just a rusted communications tower and a crumbling shack half swallowed by sand. He killed the engine and stepped into silence. The desert always had its own sound, a low hum, almost alive. Jake adjusted his sunglasses, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved. "Martinez," he said quietly, as if speaking the name might summon her. For a long moment, nothing. Then, faintly, the metallic click of a safety catch echoed from behind him. Jake froze. A calm female voice followed. "Step away from the vehicle, slowly." He turned, not fast, not defiant, and there she was. Sarah. 2 years changed her but didn't erase her. Her frame was leaner, sharper. The military buzz cut was gone, replaced by hair just long enough to brush her jawline. Dust streaked her face, but her eyes, those still, calculating eyes, hadn't changed at all. She held her Barrett low but ready, her stance effortless. It wasn't hostility, it was habit. Jake's throat tightened. "You're really alive." "Apparently," she said. No smile, just the faintest shift of her shoulders, like the weight of the words barely registered. "I buried you," Jake said softly. "I know, I read the file. They said there were no survivors. There weren't supposed to be." The wind stirred between them. Sarah lowered the rifle a fraction, then nodded toward the shack. "Not out here." Jake followed her inside. The interior was stripped bare. 1 table, 2 chairs, a generator, a radio the size of a shoebox. A map of the Middle East was pinned to the wall, dotted with fatting marks. Some red, some black, all deadly. Sarah set her rifle on the table and crossed her arms. "You shouldn't have come. Reed sent me." "That doesn't make it better." Jake studied her in silence. 2 years ago, she'd been a promising sniper with perfect discipline and dry humor. Now she looked like someone who'd seen too much, who'd lost more than she'd found. "You made a 3-kilometer shot," he said quietly. "That's what brought them to you." "I made the shot because I had to, not because I wanted headlines." "Headlines?" Jake almost laughed. "You've been dead for 2 years. There aren't supposed to be headlines." "Exactly," she said. "And now someone's going to notice that a dead soldier just killed a terrorist commander. I can't afford that kind of attention." Jake exhaled. "Reed said you've been doing missions off record. 47 confirmed kills, 12 dismantled networks." Sarah's expression didn't change. "I didn't count." "Why, Sarah, why disappear like that?" She looked past him, toward the cracked window. "When that chopper went down, I was supposed to die. And for a while I almost did. Broken ribs, dislocated shoulder. I crawled for 2 days through that desert. Then she found me, Agent Park." Jake frowned. "Lisa Park." Sarah nodded. "She made me an offer. Live in the light, maybe die within the hour. Or vanish, serve from the shadows. Do the work that can't be done with uniforms and flags." "And you chose the dark." "I chose the mission," she said simply, "but I didn't know how long the dark could last." Jake sat across from her, the chair creaking under his weight. "Reed wants you back, officially. He says you're compromised." Sarah's jaw tightened. Compromised means exposed. Exposed means dead. It also means you don't have to keep doing this alone. She let out a small, humorless laugh. You think bringing me back fixes anything? My record says I'm dead. My mother visits a grave with my name on it. You think you can undo that with paperwork? Jake leaned forward. Maybe not, but I can give you a team, cover, a way out. She studied him for a long time, her eyes searching his. Why? Why risk your career for me? Because I owe you, he said. Because you saved my life more times than I deserved, and because, he hesitated, because no one should have to fight alone. Her expression softened for a moment, but only for a heartbeat. You always were the sentimental type. And you always hated that about me. I didn't hate it, she said quietly. I just couldn't afford it. Outside, the wind shifted again, a strange vibration against the sand. Sarah moved to the window instantly, scanning the horizon with practiced calm. Something wrong? Jake asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes followed a faint glint far off in the dunes. Sniper scope, 2 clicks out. Jake froze. They found you. They found us, she corrected. In one smooth motion, she grabbed the Barrett, swung the bipod onto the windowsill and peered through the scope. Her movements were fluid, beautiful, terrifying. She exhaled, adjusted the windage, and fired. The thunder cracked through the desert. A second later, the faint plume of dust on the horizon vanished. Single hostile neutralized, she said calmly, but they don't send just one. Jake moved beside her. We need to move. Sarah nodded once, already slinging the rifle case. There's a vehicle behind the ridge. Come on. They slipped out the back of the shack just as a second shot tore through the window where Jake had been standing seconds before. The bullet embedded itself in the wall with a dull thud. Jake ducked, adrenaline surging. You said they wouldn't come this fast. I said they shouldn't. There's a difference. They sprinted across the sand, diving behind the ridge as Sarah's hidden jeep came into view, an old military vehicle stripped of identification, painted the color of dust. She started the engine with practiced precision. Seat belt, she said flatly. If we hit a mine, I'd rather collect pieces in one place. Jake almost smiled despite himself, still charming. The engine roared as they tore through the dunes, sand spraying like shrapnel behind them. Sarah drove one-handed, her other hand checking the mirrors every few seconds. Jake leaned forward. So this is what you've been doing, running, shooting, disappearing. This is me staying alive, she said. You learn quick when your own country stops claiming you. He glanced at her. You sound angry. She shrugged. I'm not angry, I just stopped expecting to be remembered. They drove for almost an hour before Sarah finally pulled over behind a cluster of rocks. The engine died, and with it came silence, heavy, fragile. Jake took a breath. You could have called, you could have let someone know you were alive. And said what? Hi, I'm back from the dead. You know how the system works. They don't bring ghosts home, they use them. Her tone was steady, but her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Jake turned to face her. You don't have to be used anymore. Reed's offering you a way back, a cover story, a reinstatement, full clearance. Sarah's head tilted slightly. A lie that keeps everyone comfortable. It's not a lie if it gives you your life back. She looked at him then, really looked. You think a file and a uniform give me my life back. Jake, my life ended in that crash. Everything since has been borrowed time. The way she said it, quiet, certain, made him realize she wasn't trying to sound tragic. She was stating fact. Jake swallowed. Then maybe it's time to stop borrowing. They sat in silence, the desert sun bleeding into gold. Dust settled over the hood like fine ash. Finally, Sarah spoke. You ever wonder what makes someone pull the trigger, Jake? Not in combat, I mean really pull it. When there's no order, no glory, just the moment and the consequence. He thought for a moment. I've pulled plenty of triggers, some I regret, most I don't think about. That's the difference, she said softly. You still have the option not to think about them. She leaned back, closing her eyes. Out there, it's not about right or wrong, it's about calculus, weight and distance. One life against 100, you stop asking if it's right. You just hope the math holds. Jake wanted to argue, to tell her she was more than math, that she was still human. But looking at her, he wasn't sure she'd believe it. Instead, he asked, "What happened to you after the crash? Everything." Sarah opened her eyes, her voice steady. "I woke up on fire. The wreck was burning, the others didn't make it. I crawled out, half blind, dragging a broken arm. For hours I waited for help that never came. Then Lisa Park found me. She told me the rescue teams were turning back, too dangerous. But she said there was another way, a black-level program, off-record. If I joined, she'd make sure my mother got the folded flag." Jake felt a hollow ache form in his chest. "She thought you were a hero." "She thought I was dead," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe that's kinder." The radio on the dashboard crackled suddenly, one coded burst. Sarah stiffened. "Lisa," she muttered, twisting the dial. A female voice came through, sharp and calm. "Sarah, report status." "Compromised. Contact with Thompson confirmed. Engaged hostile scout neutralized." Lisa's tone didn't change. "Extraction is off the table, too visible. You need to relocate immediately." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "How bad?" "They've confirmed your identity. The bounty's already out 7 figures. You're officially famous." Sarah exhaled slowly, leaning back in her seat. So the ghost finally cast a shadow. Jake leaned toward the radio. "Park, this is Commander Thompson. She's coming back under my command. We'll handle this in-house." Lisa's voice was ice. "Negative, Commander. You're not cleared to handle anything. She's a national asset under my jurisdiction." "She's a soldier," Jake said, his voice hard. "And soldiers don't belong to ghosts." There was a long pause. Then Lisa spoke quietly. "If you bring her back, you'll be rewriting the rules of war. Be careful what you resurrect." The radio went dead. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The sun dipped lower, throwing long shadows across the sand. Sarah finally broke the silence. "She's right, you know. Bringing me back isn't a rescue. It's a risk for both of us." Jake turned toward her. "Then maybe it's time we take one." Her eyes met his, tired, conflicted, searching. For the first time, she didn't look like the unshakable sniper who saw everything in calculations. She looked human. "Jake," she said softly, "if I come back, I can't be who I was. That girl died in the crash." "Then be whoever you are now," he said, "but don't disappear again." Sarah looked out at the horizon, where the sun melted into red. "You always made it sound so simple." "Because it is. You live, you fight, you come home." She gave a faint smile. "You always were bad at endings." "Then let's write a new one." That night, under a sky riddled with stars, they buried the evidence, burned files, destroyed comm devices, wiped coordinates. When the flames died, Sarah picked up a small metal plate from the sand, the dog tag that once bore her name. She turned it over in her palm, the engraved letters worn by heat and time. Then she dropped it into the fire. "Goodbye, ghost," she murmured. Jake watched the tag curl in the flames, its edges glowing red, until it was gone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, enemy operatives were already searching for the desert phantom. But for the first time in 2 years, Sarah Martinez wasn't hiding. She was coming home. How do you resurrect someone who isn't supposed to exist? The base looked the same windswept hangars, same smell of gun oil and dust. But Sarah Martinez felt every inch of difference as the gates rolled open before her. 2 years ago, this had been her world. Now it was foreign territory. The guard scanned her credentials twice. He didn't question the clearance. No one ever did when the orders came from above. But his eyes lingered. Her name was familiar, maybe from a memorial wall he'd walked past. "Welcome back, Sergeant," he said uncertainly. She gave a curt nod and drove through. Inside the compound, soldiers moved with the usual rhythm, drills, chatter, the metallic percussion of discipline. None of them knew that the woman walking among them had once been declared dead, buried with honors, and erased from every database that mattered. Every salute she returned felt like a lie she'd been ordered to tell. Jake met her outside the medical building. He looked the same, maybe a little older, more lined around the eyes, but his posture carried that same quiet authority she remembered. When he saw her step out of the vehicle, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 2 years. "Welcome home," he said softly. "Don't start," she replied, but her tone wasn't sharp, just tired. He gestured toward the building. "Paperwork first, then a medical clearance. We'll keep it simple." Simple. The word almost made her laugh. Inside, the process unfolded like theater, every line rehearsed, every lie signed with official ink. The official report read: Sergeant Sarah Martinez survived the helicopter crash with severe injuries. She spent 24 months in a classified medical rehabilitation program. Now fully recovered, she is reassigned to active duty. It sounded clean, orderly, believable as long as no one asked too many questions. The medical team, 2 uniformed doctors and a technician, performed their evaluations like actors reading from cue cards. Heart rate, reflexes, vision. One doctor glanced at the notes and said, "Your recovery is remarkable, Sergeant." Sarah met his gaze. "I've been told that before." He smiled awkwardly, checked a box and moved on. When it was over, Jake handed her a small envelope. "Your new service ID, everything matches your old record, rank restored, clearance reinstated." She opened it and stared at the plastic card inside, her photo, her name, the barcode of identity. But all she could think about was the line on the memorial wall that still bore the same name. "Funny," she murmured, "feels heavier than I remember." Jake's voice softened. "That's because you're carrying both versions of it now." That night she sat alone in the armory. Same bench, same hum of fluorescent lights. The Barrett lay before her, whole, waiting, familiar. Her hands moved automatically, checking alignment, barrel integrity, scope precision. But her mind wasn't in it. For the first time in years, she wasn't preparing for an impossible shot. She was preparing for something scarier, normalcy. Footsteps echoed behind her. Jake's voice followed. "You still clean that thing like it's sacred." Sarah didn't look up. Old habits, some things don't survive the crash. This did. He came closer, leaning against the workbench. "Tomorrow you'll meet your new team. Hand-picked, small unit, covert operations, but official this time." She smirked faintly. "Official and covert don't belong in the same sentence." "They do when I'm writing the sentence." Sarah set the cleaning rod down and looked at him. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Completely." "You're building a team around someone who technically doesn't exist." Jake shrugged. "Technically, we've both done worse." She studied his face, the steady calm, the stubborn belief that rules could bend if you pushed them hard enough. He hadn't changed much, but she had. "Just remember," she said quietly, "I don't need saving." "I know," Jake replied, "but you deserve belonging." For a second, she couldn't breathe. Then she looked back down at her rifle. "We'll see if the team agrees." Morning brought noise, the kind of organized chaos that only existed in military life. The conference room hummed with voices as 3 soldiers waited for their new commander. Jake entered first, file in hand. Behind him, Sarah followed, silent, composed, her expression unreadable. "Team," Jake began, "this is Sergeant Sarah Martinez. She'll be our precision fire support and tactical overwatch. You'll find her record exemplary." No one asked which record he meant. Master Sergeant David Chen, tall, composed, with the calm intensity of an engineer, was the first to nod. "Good to have you." Lieutenant Maria Santos, young but sharp-eyed, offered a quick smile. Heard rumors about you, she said lightly. Didn't think ghosts filed transfer papers. Sarah raised an eyebrow. I get that a lot. Finally, Corporal Tommy Williams, the medic, leaned back in his chair and said, Well, as long as you shoot straighter than I stitch, we'll be fine. That earned the first small smile from Sarah. Jake glanced around the table. We're cleared for Operation Veridian extraction and neutralization. Eastern Europe. Hostage situation. Details on the screen. He tapped the remote and satellite images flickered to life. A remote compound in forest terrain. Perimeter guards, heat signatures. Standard layout, Chen said. What's our insertion point? Ridge to the west, Jake answered. Martinez, you'll take over watch there. 900 meters, you'll have wind advantage. Sarah studied the topography, eyes narrowing. I'd prefer 1,200. More distance, better concealment. Jake gave her a look. Still prefer shooting from the edge of the world. Only place I see clearly, she replied. The team exchanged glances, a mix of curiosity and respect. They didn't know her story, but they could feel it. Soldiers could always tell when someone had seen too much. Later in the shooting range, the unspoken questions found their answers. Sarah lay prone, adjusting her sights. The others watched from behind the glass as she locked onto a target 800 meters away. The air was still, barely a whisper of crosswind. She exhaled once, squeezed the trigger. Crack! The shot split the silence. The bullet hit center mass dead on. The observer confirmed the hit, then reset the target. Perfect score, Chen said quietly. Santos frowned. No way, that was too fast. She didn't even calibrate, Williams added. Sarah reset the bolt, adjusted for distance. Next one, she said. This time the target was moving, simulated at 900 meters. She tracked it effortlessly, like watching gravity behave. Another shot, another perfect hit. Jake watched from the platform, saying nothing. He could see it, the way she breathed, moved, calculated. There was no strain, no hesitation. Every motion flowed from instinct honed in solitude. When the test ended, Sarah rose, reloading with practiced ease. That enough proof for you? She asked. Chen smiled faintly. Proof, no. Faith, maybe. Santos grinned. Okay, Ghost, you're on the team. That night the mess hall was half empty. Most soldiers had retired early. Sarah sat in the corner, nursing a cup of black coffee. She could feel eyes on her, curious, cautious. The story of her return was already spreading. Jake approached with a tray and sat across from her. You didn't eat. Didn't come here for the cuisine. He nodded, quiet for a moment. The team likes you. They don't know me. They know enough. Sarah looked down into her coffee. They think I'm a miracle recovery. You and I both know better. Then tell me, Jake said softly, what are you really? She looked up, eyes dark under the dim light. A weapon someone forgot to disarm. Jake didn't flinch. Maybe it's time to stop being one. Her voice lowered. Weapons don't stop, Jake, they just change targets. The mission briefing the next morning was short. Operation Veridian hostage rescue, neutralize hostile leadership, extraction within 20 minutes of first contact. Officially, it was routine. Unofficially, it was a test, Sarah's return to real combat under command supervision. The team prepped silently, methodically. Gear checked, coordinates confirmed, every step muscle memory. As the helicopter rotors thundered to life, Sarah strapped in beside Chen. He looked over. First mission back, huh? Something like that, she said. You nervous? She smirked faintly. If I were, you wouldn't see it. Jake's voice came over the comms. Team, this is Commander Thompson. We're wheels up in 30. Remember, precision over aggression. Get them out, no unnecessary noise. The helicopter lifted off, cutting through the gray dawn. Sarah watched the ground fall away, the landscape shifting into a blur of trees and rivers. The vibration of the engines sent a familiar hum through her body, the kind that always came before chaos. She closed her eyes. For a second the noise faded, replaced by memory, fire, metal, the helicopter crash that had rewritten her life. Her hands clenched unconsciously against her knees. Chen noticed, "You good?" She opened her eyes, forcing her breath steady. "Always." Hours later they reached the drop zone, a ridge overlooking the compound. Sarah crawled into position, Barrett set on bipod, scope aligned. Through the glass she saw everything: guards packing, headlights flickering, shadows moving through windows. The others waited below for her signal. "Command, this is Overwatch," she whispered into the mic. "Visual confirmed. Wind 8 meters southeast. 3 tangos on outer wall, 2 near entrance." Jake's voice came through steady. "Copy that, you're green when ready." Sarah adjusted the elevation dial, lined up the first target, a sentry by the east gate. Slow breath, steady finger. She fired. The man dropped before his cigarette hit the ground. "Target 1 down," she murmured, proceeding. The rhythm returned, mechanical, perfect, terrifyingly calm. Every shot a whisper, every life measured in millimeters. Below, the team advanced through the compound's perimeter, using her shots as cover. One by one, the outer defenses fell. Within minutes, the hostages were secured. "Extraction route clear," Chen reported. Jake's voice came back. "Copy, all units exfil." Sarah held her position until the last shadow disappeared into the trees. Only then did she exhale, pack the rifle, and rise. Her mission was over, but her pulse said otherwise. Back on the helicopter, no one spoke for a while. The adrenaline still hummed between them, the unspoken relief that everyone was still breathing. Williams finally broke the silence. "You know, Ghost, you might just make us look good." Sarah cracked a smile. "Wouldn't dream of it." Jake's voice came from the cockpit. "Nice shooting, Sergeant. Clean work." She looked out the open door, the night sky stretching endlessly beneath them. "Clean," she repeated quietly. "That's one word for it." The others didn't hear the tremor behind the word, but Jake did. He turned, met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd returned, saw the truth that Sarah Martinez could hit any target, except the one thing she'd been running from all along. Herself. Why did victory feel so heavy? The mission had gone flawlessly. No casualties, no alarms, no mistakes. By the book, the kind of success command turned into training examples. And yet Sarah couldn't sleep. Back in her quarters, she sat on the edge of her bunk, hands clasped, staring at the floor. The clock read 03:17. Outside, the base was silent except for the hum of distant generators. The Barrett leaned against the wall beside her, freshly cleaned, shining under the faint light. It should have brought her peace, that rhythm of oil, cloth, steel. But tonight it didn't. Because when she'd looked through that scope earlier, something had shifted. The targets had faces. Not memories, not silhouettes, faces. Every mission she'd done since dying had been impersonal, long distance, invisible. But now she was back in the world of uniforms and names meant consequences. She rubbed her temples, whispering to herself, "You're fine, you did your job." But her voice trembled, and that was enough to tell her she wasn't fine at all. The next morning, Jake found her in the shooting range again, not practicing, just sitting behind the rifle, staring through the scope like she was trying to see something that wasn't there. "You don't rest much, do you?" he asked quietly. She didn't look up. Rest is for people who don't see ghosts when they close their eyes. He stepped closer. "You did everything right yesterday." "Maybe that's the problem." Jake frowned. "Explain." Sarah exhaled, still watching the empty target 1,000 meters away. "The better you get at killing, the easier it is for people to pretend it, not killing. They just call it precision." Jake paused. "You've been in this long enough to know that's part of it." "I know," she said softly, "but part of me used to care about the why. Somewhere along the line, I stopped. He watched her, the tightness in her voice cutting deeper than the words. You think you've lost your reason. I think reason stopped mattering. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was heavy, honest. Finally, Jake said, then maybe it's time to find a new one. Later that day, command called for debrief. The team gathered in the glass-walled conference room. Jake, Sarah, Chen, Santos, Williams, and a handful of ranking officers. The large screen displayed a satellite map of the compound they'd raided. Red dots blinked across the terrain. Colonel Reed joined via secure feed. His face was sharp, his tone sharper. Operation Veridian is classified as a success, Reed began. Hostages recovered, targets neutralized, no friendly losses. Excellent work, Commander Thompson. Sergeant Martinez, exceptional marksmanship. Command has taken note. Sarah sat rigid, eyes on the table. Praise always felt like a trap. Reed continued. However, your operation triggered a digital trace, communications chatter on the black market networks. Someone's offering money for information on the Desert Phantom. We believe the Veridian strike confirmed your presence. Jake tensed. You're saying they know she's alive? Not officially, but they know a sniper with her precision is operating again, and they're looking. Santos frowned. How much money are we talking? Reed's eyes hardened. 7 million, dead or alive. The room fell silent. Sarah didn't move, didn't blink, just absorbed it. Another consequence, another cost. Jake's jaw clenched. You said you could protect her. Reed leaned forward. Protection comes at a price, Commander. We'll need her cooperation, full compliance. That includes relocation under Tier 1 surveillance. Sarah finally looked up. You mean confinement? Security, Reed corrected. She shook her head. You want to hide me. That's not protection, that's burial. Reed's tone cooled. You've already been buried once, Sergeant. Maybe it's time to stay that way. Jake cut in, his voice sharp. With respect, Colonel, she's an asset, not a liability. You can't just lock her up because she did her job too well. Reed stared at him for a long moment. Be careful, Commander. You're not authorized to feel that strongly about assets. The screen blinked off before Jake could reply. The room stayed quiet for several seconds after the call ended. Chen finally exhaled. Well, that went well. Santos muttered. So, we're basically harboring a wanted myth. Jake stood, his tone firm. No one outside this room repeats what you just heard. Understood. Everyone nodded. Sarah rose to leave, but Jake caught her arm gently. Don't disappear again. She looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. What if I'm the reason everyone else does? Then she walked out, leaving him standing in silence. That night rain came, rare, unexpected. The kind that turned the dust to mud and the air to static. Sarah stood outside under the overhang, watching it fall. The droplets slid down her face like something she didn't quite recognize. Behind her, the door creaked open. It was Lisa Park. Sarah didn't turn. Took you long enough. Lisa stepped beside her, hands in her coat pockets. You always did have a way of making trouble. Nice to see you too. I warned you that shot would expose you. Sarah smirked faintly. You also said you'd keep me invisible. Lisa's tone softened. That's harder when the world starts asking who can hit a target 3 kilometers away. They stood in silence for a while, the rain falling harder, masking their voices. Finally, Lisa said, Reed's right about one thing. You're a liability now. Every op you touch will draw fire. Sarah's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. So what's your solution? Come back to the shadows, Lisa said quietly. Go dark again. We'll scrub the records, pull you from the grid. You'll vanish for good this time. Sarah turned to face her. And what happens to them? Jake, the team. They'll survive. They always do. And what about me? Lisa hesitated. You already know the answer. Ghosts don't get happy endings. Sarah stared at her for a long time, then said, "Maybe I'm done being one." Lisa sighed, a flicker of emotion crossing her usually composed face. "You've changed." "No," Sarah said softly. "I just remembered what it felt like to be human." Lisa reached into her pocket and pulled out a small drive. "This contains every file tied to your Black Ops record. If you walk away, you take this with you. But once you do, you can't come back. Not to me, not to Reed, not to anyone." Sarah took it slowly, the metal cool against her palm. "Then I guess this is goodbye." Lisa gave a small nod. "You're still the best I ever trained." "Let's hope that's enough." Lisa stepped into the rain and disappeared, her silhouette swallowed by the storm. Sarah stood there a moment longer, clutching the drive. Then she whispered, "No more ghosts." The next day, Jake found her packing. "You're leaving," he said flatly. She didn't deny it. "They'll come for me, Jake. The longer I stay, the more danger for everyone." "That's not your call." "It's exactly my call," she said, zipping the duffel shut. "I made peace with dying once. I can't let anyone else pay for it again." He stepped closer. "You think running saves them. It just saves your guilt." She met his eyes. "You think staying saves me. It doesn't." He exhaled, frustrated. "You're not alone anymore, Sarah. Stop pretending you have to carry this alone." "I'm not pretending," she said softly. "I'm protecting." An alarm blared suddenly, sharp, shrill. Red lights flashed across the corridor. Jake grabbed his radio. "Control report. Unauthorized perimeter breach, North Sector. Hostile. Unknown, multiple signatures." Sarah's hand went to her sidearm instantly. "They found me." Jake's eyes hardened. "We hold the line." She shook her head. "No, I end it." Before he could stop her, she was gone, sprinting toward the north wing, boots splashing through the rain-soaked ground. The night exploded in flashes of gunfire. Shadows moved across the perimeter fence, fast, coordinated, professional. Sarah hit the dirt, rolled, and fired. 2 hostiles dropped instantly. Another volley followed, clipping the ground beside her. She moved like instinct, low, efficient, silent death. Jake's voice came over the comms. "Martinez, fall back." "Negative," she replied, eyes locked through the scope. "If they want the Phantom, they'll get her." She exhaled, adjusted for wind, and fired again. 3 shots, 3 bodies. But there were more, too many. She ducked behind a concrete barrier, breathing hard. Rain poured down, soaking her gear, mixing with the metallic scent of blood and mud. Then she saw it, a shape in the dark, standing still, watching, not attacking, just watching. Her finger froze on the trigger. A voice echoed through a distant loudspeaker, male, cold, accented. "Sarah Martinez, the ghost returns to her grave." She aimed through the scope, but the figure vanished. Moments later, the gunfire ceased. The attackers melted into the darkness as quickly as they'd come. The alarm shifted from active threat to retreat confirmed. Jake found her minutes later, kneeling in the mud, rain running down her face like tears she refused to shed. "You okay?" he asked, crouching beside her. She nodded once, barely. "That was a message." "From who?" She looked at the empty ridge where the voice had come from. "Someone who used to hunt with me. Now he hunts me." Jake's face hardened. "Then we hunt him back." She shook her head. "No, Jake, this isn't your fight." "The hell it is." She met his gaze, fierce, unflinching. "If you follow me into this, you won't come back the same." He held her stare. "Neither will you." The rain fell harder, thunder cracked above them. And somewhere in the darkness, a new enemy smiled, knowing that the desert phantom was alive, cornered, and already bleeding from old wounds she thought she'd buried. How do you fight a war that ended years ago, except in your head? The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It turned the base into a graveyard of puddles and whispers. Soldiers moved slower, spoke softer. Everyone felt it, the weight of the attack that had come and gone like a shadow. Sarah hadn't slept since. She sat in the armory again, staring at the Barrett laid out in pieces. Each part gleamed, spotless, perfect. Perfection was easy. Peace wasn't. Across the table, Jake watched her silently. He'd learned not to fill her silences. They weren't empty. They were armor. Finally she spoke. "He's alive." Jake frowned. "Who?" She looked up, eyes sharp. "The voice, the man outside the perimeter, I know it." "Identify." "Name, Victor Drazen, Serbian sniper, former shadow operative. We trained together, shared missions. He taught me how to disappear." Jake's jaw tightened. "And now he's hunting you." She nodded slowly. "He was on the op that killed my team." Jake leaned forward. "You think he shot your bird down?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." 2 years ago, the desert had been a furnace of sand and static. Sarah's team's 6 operatives, extraction mission gone wrong, were pinned near a ridge outside Aleppo. Drazen had been Overwatch, their ally, their ghost in the hills. She remembered his last transmission clearly. "Hold position, wind's clean, you're covered." Then the explosion. The sound of steel tearing open. The sudden silence after. When she crawled from the wreckage, he was gone. No radio, no signal, no rescue. Now he was back, calling her by name. Jake's voice cut through her thoughts. Why now? Why show himself? Sarah exhaled, low and steady. "Because I broke his rule. He taught me, never let the world remember you. And I did. That 3,247-meter shot, it told him I'm alive." Jake's jaw flexed. Then he wants to erase his mistake. Or finish his lesson. Later that night, Sarah sat in the dark of her quarters, the small drive Lisa Park had given her resting in her palm. She'd avoided opening it, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Some truths were bullets. Once fired, you couldn't take them back. But now she had no choice. She plugged it into her terminal. The screen flickered to life. Files unfolded, operation logs, encrypted messages, surveillance footage. And then a folder marked Echo Down, the mission that had ended her life. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The footage was grainy drone surveillance, black and white. Her team's convoy moving through the desert, a flash, the explosion, static. Then a new feed, one she'd never seen. A sniper's scope overlay. Wind reading, 5.2 mph. Distance, 2,100 meters. Target, friendly asset, U.S. transport helicopter. The crosshairs settled, and the shooter's ID flashed for one frame. Operative Drazen Victor. Sarah's breath caught, the gun fired, the screen went white. She ripped the drive out and dropped it on the table like it was poison. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Jake knocked once and stepped in. "You found something." She didn't look at him. He did it, he killed them, all of them, and Command knew. "What do you mean, knew?" She turned the monitor toward him, replaying the last 10 seconds. "They logged it. Look, see the timestamp. That's not surveillance. That's authorization. He wasn't rogue. He was assigned." Jake leaned in, his face pale. "Jesus, they ordered him to destroy your team." Sarah nodded slowly. "And they let me crawl out of it so I could keep doing their dirty work." The words hit like a bullet. Neither of them could dodge. By morning, Jake had already called Reed. The colonel's voice came through tight, clipped, defensive. "You don't understand the context, Commander." Jake slammed his hand on the desk. "Don't talk to me about context. You sanctioned friendly fire." Reed's tone hardened. "Those were black-level decisions. You don't get to question them." "I just did." Reed sighed, heavy and deliberate. "You have no idea what Martinez's unit was carrying. There was classified intel aboard that bird, tech we couldn't afford to let fall into enemy hands. The directive was containment." Jake's voice dropped to a low growl. Containment. That's what you call murdering your own people. Reed didn't answer. Jake looked at Sarah, her expression unreadable, but her hands clenched tight at her sides. Reed finally said, "She was never supposed to know. Neither were you. Now you both do, and that's a problem." The line went dead. Sarah exhaled slowly, her voice almost calm. "Now we know why he's back." Jake frowned. "To finish the job." She shook her head. "No, to make sure no one ever tells the story." By evening, the team knew something was wrong. Chen noticed the tension, Santos the silence, Williams the missing humor. But no one asked. Soldiers knew when to keep their questions holstered. Sarah checked her gear in the loading bay, tightening the strap on her rifle. Jake approached, his voice low. "Reed, sending a recovery unit, says it's for protection. I don't buy it." "Neither do I," Sarah said. "He wants you contained." "Then we move first." Jake hesitated. "You're talking about going off-grid again." "I'm talking about finishing this," she said. "If I run, they'll hunt me forever. If I stop him, maybe I get to stop being their secret." He stared at her. "You go rogue, they'll label you traitor." She met his gaze evenly. "They already labeled me dead. I'm just updating the record." Hours later, they were gone. Jake, Sarah, and Chen, the only two she trusted completely, slipped out through the maintenance tunnel beneath the southern hangar. The desert stretched wide and endless ahead. No spotlights, no alarms, just darkness and wind. They moved through the dunes until dawn broke red across the horizon. Ahead, the ruins of an abandoned communications outpost stood like bones, half-collapsed towers, empty barracks, ghosts of old wars. Sarah stopped. "He'll come here." Jake frowned. "How do you know?" "Because this is where we trained, where he taught me everything. Drazen doesn't hunt with maps, he hunts with memory." They set up camp in the ruins. Sarah unpacked the Barrett, assembling it in silence while Chen checked comm frequencies. Jake paced, tension radiating off him like heat. "Do you really think he'll walk into this?" he asked. "He already has," she said quietly. "The message at the base wasn't a threat, it was an invitation." Jake stopped packing. "You're saying he wants you here?" "Yes, he wants to finish what we started." "Then what's your plan?" She looked up, eyes cold and steady. "End it, one way or another." Night fell. The desert turned black and silver under the moonlight. Sarah lay prone on the roof of the old barracks, scope scanning the horizon. The world was silent, too silent. Then she heard it, faint, rhythmic like someone stepping on broken glass. She whispered into her mic, 2 o'clock, ridge line, distance 1,400 meters. Jake's voice came through, "Copy." Chen adjusted the thermal scanner. "Got him, single heat signature, moving slow." Sarah steadied her breath. "He's testing me." A crack split the air, a single bullet whistling past her cheek, embedding into the wall behind her. She didn't flinch. "He's close." "Martinez, stay low," Jake ordered. She ignored him. "You can't hide forever, Victor," she whispered into the mic, knowing he was listening. "You taught me that." Another shot rang out, this one closer, grazing her shoulder. Pain bloomed hot and sharp, but she stayed focused. Her scope caught a flicker of movement, the glint of a barrel, a shadow kneeling against the rocks. "There you are," she murmured. She exhaled and fired. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. A heartbeat later, the figure collapsed. Jake and Chen reached the ridge minutes later. Drazen lay sprawled on the sand, blood soaking through his shirt, still alive. Barely. His pale eyes looked up at Sarah as she approached, Barrett slung across her back. "You always were my best shot," he rasped. Sarah crouched beside him. "You killed them, you killed us." He coughed a laugh, red spattering his lips. "Orders, Sarah. You of all people should understand that." "I understand betrayal," she said coldly. "You called it strategy." His eyes flickered. "You think I enjoyed it? We were assets, replaceable pieces. They told me it was a test proof of loyalty, so I pulled the trigger. Sarah's hand shook slightly, and you lived with it. I didn't live, he whispered. I waited for you, because I knew one day you'd want the truth. She stared down at him, her breath ragged. And what truth is that? That you were supposed to take the shot. They chose me because they knew you wouldn't. Her heart stopped. What? You failed the test before it started. That's why they buried you. Not because you died, because you hesitated. The words cut through her like glass. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The wind howled through the ruins. Jake moved closer. Sarah, don't. She raised her pistol, hand trembling. Drazen didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on hers. You think killing me changes anything, he whispered. You're already one of us. She stared at him, the man who made her a ghost, and for a heartbeat the world went silent. Then she lowered the gun. No, she said softly, I'm done being one of you. She turned away. Drazen's voice followed, faint, mocking. You can't bury ghosts, Sarah. She looked back, eyes steady. No, she said, but you can stop feeding them. She raised the pistol again, one clean shot. Silence. The next morning the sun rose pale over the dunes. Sarah sat on the ridge, rifle beside her, staring at the horizon. Jake approached quietly, boots crunching against sand. Did you get what you needed? He asked. She didn't answer at first. Then, no, but I got what I deserved. He looked at her, the dried blood on her sleeve, the 1,000-yard stare that came from killing a part of yourself. What now? She exhaled. Now we tell the truth, no matter the cost. Jake nodded slowly. Then we do it together. Sarah turned to him, her eyes softer now. You sure you're ready to lose everything for this? He gave a small, tired smile. You already taught me how. They stood in silence as the wind picked up, two soldiers against the world, surrounded by the ghosts of their past. And somewhere behind them, the desert swallowed another secret whole. What's the price of truth when you've already sold your silence? The desert looked endless, but Sarah knew better. Every horizon was a border, every breath monitored. By the time they reached the extraction point, the sand had swallowed the last trace of Drazen's blood. It was as if the man and his sins had never existed. But ghosts didn't vanish that easily. Jake stood beside the jeep, scanning the horizon through binoculars. We need to move. Reed will have our location by now. Sarah loaded the last of their gear. Let him come. I'm done running. He turned toward her, jaw tight. You think that's bravery? That's suicide. She looked up, calm. Maybe both. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind blew hard enough to sting their faces. Jake dropped the binoculars. You're not dying for their lies. I'm not dying, she said. I'm ending something. They drove through the dunes for hours. No music, no conversation, just the hum of the engine and the low growl of a storm building in the distance. The radio stayed off. They couldn't risk transmissions. Jake finally broke the silence. What's your plan, Sarah? Expose Reed, the agency. You know they'll discredit everything. She glanced at him. I don't need them to believe me. I just need the truth to exist. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Then we find someone who can make it exist. By nightfall, they reached Candor Airfield, an old military strip used for storage and forgotten logistics. It wasn't on the map anymore, which made it perfect. Chen was already there, waiting beside a fuel truck. He waved them over. You took your time, he said, then noticed the look in Sarah's eyes. What happened? Jake answered for her. The man who took down her team, she found him. Chen's gaze darkened, and she finished it. Chen nodded slowly. Then it's time we finish the rest. He pulled a case from the truck, encrypted drives, documents, and sealed communications logs from Reed's operations. Everything I could pull before the system locked me out, enough to burn them down twice over. Sarah looked at the pile. If we send that out, every agent on the continent will come after us. Not if we do it right, Jake said. We'll leak it anonymously, multiple outlets, foreign channels. Let the story fight for itself. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. And when Reed finds out? Jake's expression hardened. Then he can come find us. 2 hours later, they were airborne in a stolen C-130 transport plane, heading west, destination classified even to themselves. The cabin lights were dim, the air thick with diesel and tension. Sarah sat near the back, staring at the laptop screen as the data upload crawled forward, 12%, 34%, 58%. Each percentage felt like pulling a trigger she couldn't unpull. Chen monitored the signal intercepts. We're clean so far, no trace detected. Jake stood by the cockpit, headset pressed to his ear. We've got 10 minutes before command triangulates. That's all you've got, Martinez. Almost done, she said quietly. The final file, Operation Echo Down, authorization recordings finished uploading. A soft beep confirmed it was live. Sarah exhaled, almost in disbelief. It's out. Jake smiled faintly. Then it's over. But it was. An alarm flashed red on the console. Radar lock. Chen swore under his breath. We've got incoming 2 drones, high altitude. Jake's voice hardened. They're going to bring us down. Sarah moved to the cockpit. Not if we dive below radar. Below radar means mountains, Chen warned. Then we fly through them. Jake took the controls, his knuckles white on the yoke. The plane dropped altitude sharply, engines howling. Alarms screamed. The cargo bay rattled like it would tear apart. Outside, lightning flashed over jagged cliffs, the kind of terrain pilots avoided for a reason. Sarah strapped in beside Chen, holding onto the rail. If we make it through this. He grinned despite the chaos. You'll owe me dinner. The first missile hit nearby, the shockwave rocking the aircraft. The second passed overhead, missing by meters. Jake fought the controls, teeth gritted. Come on, old girl, he muttered to the plane, forcing it lower, skimming the edge of the canyon until the radar ping disappeared. Then silence. They'd lost the drones. The only sound was the storm outside and the rasp of their own breathing. Hours later, they landed on a dry stretch of abandoned tarmac in southern Turkey. The engines cut out, leaving them in total stillness. Chen checked the satellite uplink. Transmission confirmed. All major outlets received the files. Global encryption. Reed's not stopping that wave. Jake looked at Sarah. You did it. She didn't smile. Then why doesn't it feel like victory? Chen opened his mouth to answer, then froze. We've got movement. Headlights appeared at the far end of the runway. Black SUVs, moving fast. Jake cursed, Reed's people. Sarah grabbed her rifle. Go, I'll hold them. Jake caught her wrist. Not this time. Jake. Not again, he said, voice breaking slightly. I already buried you once. The headlights grew larger, closer, a line of vehicles closing in through the storm. Sarah met his eyes. Then promise me something. Anything. If we don't make it out, tell them I wasn't the ghost. Tell them I was the one who stayed. Jake's throat tightened. You're not dying here. Then you'd better drive. The first SUV opened fire, suppressed bursts cutting through the night. Bullets shattered glass, tore through metal. Jake gunned the throttle, the plane's wheels screaming as it rolled forward, faster, faster. Sarah swung open the cargo door, knelt, and aimed. 3 quick shots. One SUV veered off, colliding with another in sparks and fire. Nice shooting, Chen shouted. Don't compliment me, she muttered. It slows me down. Another burst of gunfire. A bullet grazed her shoulder, her second wound in 2 days. She gritted her teeth and kept firing. Jake shouted, We're not taking off too heavy, we bail here. He swerved the plane to a stop behind a hangar. They grabbed what they could, weapons, drives, med kits, and sprinted for cover. The SUV skidded to a halt nearby, armed men spilling out, moving with practiced formation. Chen ducked behind a concrete barrier. How many? Too many, Jake said. Sarah reloaded, her voice calm. Then we make them count. The firefight exploded, thunder and steel. Sarah fired with surgical precision, every shot deliberate. She wasn't just defending, she was cleansing, every bullet a confession, every exhale a prayer for the one she'd lost. Chen covered her flank, his rifle echoing off the hangar walls. Jake moved between them, directing fire, scanning for weak points. But there were too many. For every hostile they dropped, two more replaced them. Chen shouted, "We're pinned." Jake looked to Sarah. She was already bleeding, face pale but focused. "There's a maintenance tunnel under the hangar," he said. "It leads out to the ridge. Go." She shook her head. "If we run, they'll follow. We stay." "Sarah." "Go," she snapped. "That's an order." Jake hesitated only a second, then grabbed Chen and dragged him toward the tunnel. "I'll come back for you." "You won't have to," she said softly. When the gunfire finally slowed, Sarah was alone. Her magazine was empty, her pulse thundered, the smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air. She leaned against the wall, sliding down slowly, blood staining her sleeve. Across the hangar she heard the crunch of boots. A shadow moved closer, tall, precise, unmistakable. Colonel Reed. He stepped into the light, pistol drawn, expression unreadable. "You always were too good for orders." She looked up at him, half smiling. "Guess I learned from the best." He raised the gun. "You leaked classified material. You think the truth sets you free. It only sets the world on fire." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Then maybe it needs to burn." He hesitated, just a flicker. "You could have had everything, a new life, anonymity, but you chose defiance." She laughed weakly. "No, I chose myself." He pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. Sarah raised her pistol, already loaded. "That's the thing about ghosts," she said quietly. "We remember how to haunt." The shot echoed through the hangar. Reed fell. When Jake and Chen emerged from the ridge minutes later, the hangar was burning. Flames painted the night sky orange and gold. "Sarah," Jake shouted, running toward the wreckage. Inside, he found her sitting near the wreck of a fuel drum, clutching her arm, blood still seeping through her sleeve. She looked up at him and smiled faintly. "Told you I'd end it." He knelt beside her. "You're bleeding out." She shook her head. "Not yet." Chen rushed in with a med kit, kneeling beside them. "We need to move. Reinforcements will be here in minutes." Sarah looked past them, out at the horizon, the first trace of dawn breaking through smoke. "It's okay," she whispered. "They'll find the files. The truth's already out." Jake's eyes burned. "We can still save you." She smiled weakly. "Maybe you already did." By sunrise, the story had broken. Every major network carried it. Leaked operations, buried missions, betrayal at the highest level. Reed's name flashed across screens in disgrace. Investigations launched, files unsealed. The ghost of Sarah Martinez had started a war of truth. One bullet, one secret, one sacrifice at a time. 3 days later, in a hospital outside Ankara, Jake sat beside her bed. Her shoulder was bandaged. Her pulse was steady. The doctors called it a miracle. He called it survival. She opened her eyes slowly. "Still here." "Not leaving this time," he said. She gave a faint smile. "You always were terrible at following orders." "Guess I learned from the best," he replied. Silence settled between them, soft, peaceful. Sarah looked toward the window where sunlight filtered through sheer curtains. "You think it'll matter, what we did?" Jake nodded. "To someone somewhere it already does." She exhaled slowly, closing her eyes. Then maybe it was worth it. And for the first time in years, she slept without dreaming of sand or fire, only light. What happens after the war ends, but the noise does. Sarah Martinez woke to the sound of rain, soft, steady, clean. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The antiseptic scent, the soft hum of machines, the weight of sheets tucked too neatly around her, none of it felt real. Then her shoulder burned, and memory came flooding back. The hangar, the fire, Reed, the gun. And Jake pulling her out of the smoke, calling her name like it still meant something. She turned her head. The hospital room was quiet, washed in pale light. Outside, the world looked peaceful, too peaceful. It was strange, she thought, how silence could feel louder than gunfire. Jake sat in the chair beside her bed, asleep, his head tilted awkwardly. His uniform jacket hung on the backrest, still dusted with sand and ash. She studied him for a long time, the way his hand rested near hers, the way fatigue lined his face. He looked older now, but maybe that's what truth did. It aged people faster than lies. She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand lightly. He stirred, then opened his eyes. "Hey," he said, voice rough from exhaustion. "Welcome back." She tried to smile, but it came out faint. "How long?" "3 days. You scared the hell out of everyone." "Everyone?" He hesitated. "You've been on every channel since the leak." Sarah's brow furrowed. "The files." "Went global," Jake said. "Reed's gone, arrested. They're digging through the whole network, covert ops, containment orders, the echo down records. You started something bigger than either of us." She looked at him quietly. "And what about me?" Jake leaned back. "They don't know what to do with you. Technically, you don't exist, but they can't deny what you did." She looked away. "They'll spin it, they always do." "Maybe," Jake said softly, "but this time there's proof." By the end of the week, she was strong enough to walk again. The doctors wanted to keep her under watch, but Sarah insisted on freedom. After everything, she couldn't stand walls, not even the white, clean kind. Jake helped her outside, where the hospital courtyard opened to a quiet garden. The air smelled of rain and pine. She sat on a bench, breathing deeply. "You ever notice," she said softly, "how peace feels heavier than war?" Jake frowned. "Heavier?" She nodded. "In war, everything's simple: survive, protect, complete the mission. But out here, you have to figure out what to do with the silence." He sat beside her. "Then what will you do with yours?" She thought for a moment. "Maybe I'll learn how to live in it." He smiled faintly. "That's a start." 2 days later, a black sedan arrived at the hospital. The men who stepped out wore suits instead of uniforms. No insignias, no names, the kind of presence that meant official without ever saying from where. They asked for Sarah Martinez. Jake stayed by her side as they entered the room. The lead agent, mid-40s, calm, professional, handed her a document. "Ms. Martinez," he began, "the United States government acknowledges your role in the exposure of several unauthorized operations. Due to the classified nature of these missions, your actions cannot be publicly commended." Sarah gave a dry laugh. "Of course not." The man continued, unfazed. "However, as of this morning, the charges against you have been dropped. You are officially cleared of all criminal allegations. Your record has been amended." "Amended," Jake repeated. "Your name will not appear in any current or future inquiries," the agent said. "As far as public record is concerned, Sergeant Martinez was posthumously honored for her service and sacrifice." Sarah stared at the paper. "So, I'm dead again." The agent nodded. "It's the safest outcome for you and for everyone involved." Jake stepped forward. "She deserves more than that." The agent met his eyes. "Deserves got nothing to do with it, Commander. You both know how this works." He turned back to Sarah. "You're free to go anywhere. New identity, relocation, whatever you need. But if you stay, people will come asking questions you can't answer." Sarah took the document, folded it neatly, and set it aside. "Thank you," she said quietly. The agent hesitated, almost human for a moment. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. She gave him a small, tired smile. Funny how the right thing always feels like punishment. They left without another word. That evening, Jake found her sitting in the garden again, the document burning a hole in her lap. "So," he said, "they've buried you twice. That has to be a record." She smirked faintly. "Maybe they'll give me a medal for persistence." He sat down beside her. "You could disappear again. New name, new life. No one would ever find you." "And what about you?" "I'd still find you," he said quietly. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she said, "You really should have been a poet, Jake." He chuckled softly. "Not with my handwriting." Silence stretched between them, the kind that said more than words could. Finally she said, "You ever think about what comes next? For you or for the world?" "Both." He leaned back. "For the world, cleanup, cover-ups, hearings, they'll fix what they can and forget the rest. They always do." "And for me?" Jake looked at her, really looked. "You're alive, start there." A week later, the hospital cleared her. Jake drove her to the nearest airbase, where transport flights came and went without questions. She stood beside him at the edge of the runway, wind whipping through her hair, the smell of jet fuel mixing with dust. "You sure about this?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "I have to go. If I stay, I become a symbol, and I don't want that." "You already are." "Then let them remember the story," she said, "not the face." Jake's throat tightened. "Where will you go?" She smiled faintly. "Where no one's shooting at me, hopefully." He reached into his jacket and handed her a small silver tag, worn, scratched, familiar. Her old dog tag. "I thought it burned," she said softly. "I pulled it from the wreck," he replied. "Figured it belonged to the living, not the dead." She turned it over in her hand. The letters were faded, but they still carried weight. Martinez S. She looked up at him. "You sure you don't need this as proof I existed?" He shook his head. "I don't need proof I was there." She smiled, then leaned in and kissed his cheek, gentle, grateful, final. "Thank you, Jake, for believing I could still be human." He didn't trust his voice, so he just nodded. The transport engines roared to life. Sarah slung her small duffel over her shoulder and walked toward the plane. Halfway up the ramp, she turned back. Jake stood where she'd left him, hand raised in quiet salute. She returned it, steady, sharp, perfect. Then she disappeared inside. Weeks passed. The world moved on. The media called it the ghost leak. They spoke of an anonymous whistleblower within the military whose evidence exposed corruption, unauthorized killings, and black operations gone wrong. They never said her name. That was how she wanted it. Jake stayed on base, reassigned to a desk job he didn't ask for. Some called him reckless, others loyal. He didn't care. Every night he'd find himself looking at the empty range where she used to practice, the faint outline of footprints that the wind hadn't quite erased. Sometimes, when the wind hit right, he swore he could still hear her voice. "Wind's got a story, Jake. You just have to listen right." He'd close his eyes, and for a second, the noise of the world would fade, replaced by calm. Not peace, not closure, just calm. And that was enough. Thousands of miles away, in a small coastal town where no one asked names and no one saluted, a woman sat on a pier with a cup of coffee and a folded newspaper. The headline read, "Whistleblower files confirm military cover-up. Justice Department opens inquiry." She smiled faintly, then folded the paper and let the sea breeze carry it away. Her shoulders still ached when it rained, but the pain felt honest now, not punishment, not penance. Just life reminding her she'd survived it. She looked out over the horizon, the water shimmering gold in the morning light. For the first time in years, she didn't think about missions, orders, or ghosts. She thought about what it meant to simply be. Jake once told her that home wasn't a place. It was the moment you stopped running. As the tide rolled in, Sarah Martinez decided she'd finally found hers. She whispered to no one, maybe dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And for the first time, the ghost of the desert disappeared, not because she died, but because she finally lived. How do you measure a life that was never supposed to exist? Months had passed since the world whispered about the ghost leak. Governments blamed algorithms, spokespeople denied everything. And the woman who started it all, Sarah Martinez, vanished as quietly as she had returned. No memorials, no medals, just silence. But sometimes, silence speaks louder than anything else. Jake Thompson still woke before dawn. Habit, discipline, or maybe memory. He'd retired from field command, officially, on indefinite leave. Unofficially, he was the man who'd helped a ghost break her chain of command. He lived now on the edge of a small mountain town, in a house built from quiet. The walls smelled of pine and coffee, instead of oil and gunpowder. Some mornings, he'd walk the trail overlooking the valley, wind brushing through the trees like the breath of something unfinished. He told himself he'd stop waiting for news, but he never really did. Every time the wind shifted east, he found himself listening, just in case she was still out there. One afternoon, a letter arrived, no return address, postmarked from somewhere near the coast. The handwriting was steady, neat, unmistakable. He sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the paper, and began to read. Jake, if you're reading this, it means you kept your promise to listen when the wind speaks. I'm safe, don't worry about where. I've learned that sometimes survival isn't hiding, it's choosing peace, even if the world doesn't understand it. You once asked me what I'd do with the silence. I'm learning, slowly. I teach at a small range now. Civilians, farmers, fishers, kids who just want to learn discipline. None of them know who I was. They just know I'm patient and that I listen before I speak. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not the noise of righting wrongs, but the quiet of not creating new ones. If anyone asks what happened to me, tell them the truth. I stopped being a ghost. Yes. Jake sat for a long time after finishing the letter. He didn't fold it or put it away. He just stared at the signature, the single initial that felt heavier than a full name. That night he dreamed. He was back on the firing range. The desert wind howled, carrying echoes of every shot they'd ever fired together. Sarah stood at the far end, the Barrett cradled in her arms, sun lighting her hair in gold. She wasn't aiming this time. She was just watching the horizon, calm. When he called her name, she turned, smiled faintly, and said, "Wind's clean today. Maybe it's time to let it carry the rest away." He woke with tears on his face, the kind that didn't sting, only softened. Far away on that same coast, Sarah stood on the pier as the sun began to set. The sea breathed slow and steady. Children laughed in the distance. Somewhere behind her, a radio played a song she didn't know. In front of her, the horizon stretched, endless and quiet. She closed her eyes, letting the wind brush across her face, and for a moment she could almost feel the desert again, the dry air, the weight of the Barrett, the heartbeat before a shot. But now there was no trigger. Only breath. Only peace. She thought about all the things she'd seen, the friends she'd lost, the lies she'd uncovered, the blood that would never wash completely away. For so long, she believed her strength came from endurance, from how much pain she could carry without breaking. But now she understood, real strength wasn't carrying it. It was learning to set it down. Across the world, her story, or rather, the idea of her story, kept moving. Anonymously leaked footage of her final missions circulated online, stripped of identity but not of emotion. People called her the unknown sniper, the ghost who spoke, the woman who turned on the system. None of them knew her name, and that was how she wanted it. But among soldiers, whispers still passed quietly from one base to another. There was a woman once. Took a 3-kilometer shot and disappeared. Said truth was worth the silence. Some called her a traitor. Some called her a hero. Most just called her gone. Jake never corrected them. Because the truth wasn't for stories, it was for souls. And hers had already earned its peace. Years later, a young recruit arrived at the same base where Sarah's memorial still stood, a black marble slab with names carved deep into it. Among them, Martinez Sarah Ekia. The recruit placed her hand on the engraving, brow furrowed. Who was she? She asked the old instructor standing beside her. He smiled faintly. Best shot I ever saw. Taught me that the hardest thing a soldier can do isn't pulling the trigger, it's walking away from one. The recruit nodded, thoughtful. Did she really die out there? The instructor looked toward the wind, a faint smile ghosting across his face. Depends who you ask. The girl looked confused, but he didn't explain. Some truths weren't meant for classrooms. They were meant for silence. That night the instructor sat alone in his quarters, an old photo resting on his desk. 2 soldiers in desert fatigues, sand in their hair, exhaustion in their smiles. He traced a finger over her face, then turned the photo over. On the back in fading ink was written, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." He placed the photo back into his journal and closed it gently. Outside, the wind shifted east again, carrying with it the soft rhythm of the sea, and, if one listened closely enough, a woman's calm voice saying, "Wind's got a story, Jake. You just have to listen right." Fade out narration, YouTube voiceover tone. She never wanted glory. Never asked for medals or for forgiveness. All she wanted was for the truth to outlive her silence. In a world that rewards noise, she chose stillness. In a profession that demands obedience, she chose conscience. And in a life built on precision, she finally learned mercy for herself. Her story isn't about revenge or victory. It's about what happens when a soldier remembers they're human. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a warrior can do is put the weapon down. Sarah Martinez was never seen again. But in every whispered story, in every lesson passed quietly from one soldier to the next, her voice lived on not as a myth, not as a ghost, but as a reminder that the strongest aim isn't the one that kills. It's the one that chooses not to.